Alrighty, so here we are. We've got our handle, we've got it marked up, ready to go through and route down both edges to give ourselves a nice tapered feel. So that's what this is going to look like when it's done. Gives you a nice handhold grip through there. Looks pretty tasty as well. But to give ourselves more surface area so that our base of our router can actually run along something nice and flat, we will clamp it next to a secondary piece. And in this case, I'm just going to use a large block of timber. I'm going to come through and set this up in our vise, like so. And we're just going to bring it in from left to right. So we want to go through and we want to put a slight tape on all of these 4 edges. Unfortunately, using the router is not necessarily the safest option, and you have to create a jig, and we're not going to do that. We're going to go through and use some hand tools here, use a file to go through and chamfer this off, but we need to sort out what angle this needs to be at. Now, I think the easiest way to do this is to figure out what this taper here on your mallet head is. And for that, we're going to come across here, grab our mallet handle and just hold it there like so. I'm then going to grab this here. I'm just going to push that up. And as I can see here, that is 4 millimeters from the top of this handle here, the flat edge of this handle here, to the edge of the chamfer there. 4 millimeters. And I'm just going to go trace that on the edges around here and the top edge here as well. And I'm going to show you exactly what that's going to look like. Once again, guys, if you don't have one of these, go get one. They're Carbotech. They're about $20, I think, and they're set as a stop block, so marking can be a little bit easier. But if you don't have one of these, guys, no stress whatsoever. Just go through and use a regular ruler. So I'm going to use this here. I'm going to come through. So as you can see here, I've gone around and I've got this drawn on with a line, 4 millimeter line and a 4 millimeter line coming through. And I'm just going to grab a file and I'm going to make sure that I'm holding that at a 45 degree. I'm going to file down to this line on that 45 degree. Now, to hold that at a 45 degree, once again, get down at the same height as your as your handle. And then come through and just hold that on that 45. You can look at it from the side here, make sure it's looking nice at 45 degree, and just go for it. Woo! Look at that. Guys, we are so close to being done here. We need to go through, drill a hole, give it a final sand, and then throw some finish on it, and we are done. So, to mark this hole up, all we're going to come through and do is draw a line from the edge of this corner here down to the edge of that corner there, and vice versa. And that's going to give us a center point right in the middle there. And that center point is exactly where we're going to go through and drill a nice 9.5 millimeter hole. So let's do it. So here we are over the drill press. Make sure all that long hair, anything loose, bangly, jewelry-like is tied up or removed. And of course, go ahead and slap on some safety glasses. Now we need a backing piece for this one so that we don't drill through and split out the other end, because that's not what we want. So this is going to come through, lock in our position here. I'm going to come down and ensure that this is drilling exactly where I want it to be drilling. Once again, I've clamped this down in its own special clamping system. I'm going to turn this bad boy on. I'm going to drill down very slowly. You can see we've got a nice clean hole come through there. Let's move on. From there, go ahead, grab that eraser and erase any pencil marks you've got left on your project. We want to clean this up for the final sand, and then of course going through and putting some finish on there. So this is the last step. Now ideally you'd like to go through and put 3 coats of finish on, But that's going to take probably three separate periods for you guys who are in at school completing this task. So go ahead, clean it up, make sure there's nothing on there, and then we can get ahead and do that final sanding. Now, for that final sanding, I'm going to go through and I'm going to start with 120 grit. Now, I've got a piece of pretty loved 120 grit here, and I'm okay with that because ultimately I've already gone through and I have removed a lot of the stuff previously. Got my sandpaper in there. I'm just going to come through and just remove any other lines that are on there, giving the whole thing a nice sanding. Alrighty guys, we are up to the last stage, which is finishing. So adding that oil, I'm using an oil day, but adding that finish, that protective coat to the product. Now, if I had some around, I'd definitely prefer to use a wax, but alas, I don't have any wax on me, so I'm gonna come through and use this oil I've got here. This is an exterior oil that I did just happen to have lying around the house, but it'll do a great job. Another product I'd probably like to finish it with is a wipe-on poly, just because I really appreciate the, once again, if you build up enough coats, the tactile experience. So as you can see, as I'm adding this oil on, it is bringing out a bit of a sheen and making it slightly or quite, is making it very beautiful indeed. So when I'm oiling, I'm actually going around, and for this first coat, I'm okay on this first section, I'm okay to go through and just apply wherever. I'm just trying to cover everything right now, but then we've got to come through and remove hand marks. For now, I'm just going to go through and... Now, if we go ahead and say that's done there, the next issue we're going to go through and have is that when it dries, our fingerprints are going to be on here. So it's always good to have a stash of spare rags, and then you're going to go over the product whilst holding it in one rag and go over the whole product like so. And we're just going around to make sure that we're removing any potential fingerprints or issues you're going to struggle with. And then I'm going to let this dry. I'm just leave this on a rag so that it's staying away from any dust that's on a bench or any of the like anyone touching it, coming through and touching it. Once again, going to come through and repeat the process on the mallet head here. So I'm just rubbing it in, kind of like sunscreen. Anything that's extra, I'm just going to wipe off at the end. So coming through, adding it on. And it really does help bring out the grain in the timber. It actually is quite beautiful Tasmanian oak. And yeah, it really does add a very nice aesthetic. Now, one thing I will say is that you need to go through and add oil to the center of your product. So we want to get some in here. So the easiest way is to get a stick or an offcut and then get it down on the inside there and poking it around. Depending on how small your fingers are, you may be able to get them in there. I can get mine in there and come through and just cover that whole area in there with the oil, because as much as it's going through and creating an aesthetic, it also stops the timber from drying out too much and causing any issues there. So you really do want this going the whole way through and protecting your job all the way through. And finally, don't forget to come back to that handle and stick it through the center. Now for that, just use a pencil, the rear end of a pencil, put it in there and spin it around and push that through. Now, as long as you go in from both directions, you should cover your whole project on the inside with oil. Once again, always remembering to go back through with some extra cloths and remove any finger marks you may have just left behind, because we don't want any of that going on. Now, you want to go through and listen to the instructions on the can or the tin or wherever you're getting your product from. Listen to the instructions on how long it needs to dry, and then you'll be good to go. And we're back. We've had a good hour and a half for this to dry. Now, it is touch dry. Doesn't mean you can recoat it. It is touch dry, but we're going to go through and throw this in here. And look at this mallet. It is a thing of beauty, guys. Congratulations on finishing off not only a spectacular piece of timber work here or woodworking, but also congratulations on finishing a mallet. You now have a trusty mallet to go ahead and knock up any of those pieces you need to get done, Congratulations, guys. Awesome job. And I'll see you in the next episode of the Woodwork Experience.